It says we're live. I will go check Facebook very quickly. Okay, perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our behind the scene workshop. I hope you are all doing great today. We're very happy to host this behind the scene workshop on booty bumping. I will start with our tradition at Max Ottawa, which is to acknowledge that we are today on the unceded and surrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Thank you for being here today, or thank you for watching this presentation if you're watching it from YouTube. Behind the Scene is our monthly educational and bilingual workshop and presentation program, health workshops. We try to alternate between French and English to offer educational and awareness raising workshops and presentations. I just want to remind you very quickly that this presentation will be recorded and that you can find it on our YouTube account at Max Ottawa. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat box and we will be happy to answer them after the presentation. Today we are here with Matt Adams, who agreed to present today. Thank you, Matt. Matt Adams uses he/him pronouns and is the harm reduction programs coordinator at Max Ottawa. He runs T2Go, and he is also in charge of education and harm reduction support groups. He is Max's former summer community outreach worker from the 2019 Pride season. And in his spare time, he likes to write, make art and clothing, and play video games. For this behind the scene edition, we will be discussing booty bumping, which is a method of using drugs where you mix them with water and insert them up your butt. We'll go over some common questions and concerns around booty bumping and do a demonstration using a peach to show some tips about how to booty bump as safely as possible, prevent HIV and Hep C, and maximize your pleasure. Please be advised that this presentation will feature frank discussions of sex and substance use. Matt, you can start whenever you're ready, so I'll just add the presentation to the screen.
Sure. Just let me get started here. All right. So, yes, thanks so much for having me today, Khaled. Super excited to get to talk about booty bumping. But yeah, so we'll dive right in. So I like to call this presentation Do the Booty Bump. I think that's a fun way to get it started. And as you'll notice, peaches are going to be a recurring theme throughout the visual story of the booty bumping, of this booty bumping workshop. So here's the agenda for the night. Because it's a tradition at Max that we all do land acknowledgements, I have my own land acknowledgement to do. We have the outcomes for the evening. We're going to do Booty Bumping 101. Then we're going to do a booty bumping walkthrough, which is going to be a pre-recorded video for y'all to watch. Then we're going to talk about just the tips and go into booty bumping and sex. And then we're going to have our final takeaways and a spot to answer questions if there are any. All right, so for our land acknowledgement, hang on, give me 1 second here. So we want to take a moment before we begin to acknowledge that we are on the traditional, unsurrendered, and stolen territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. As an uninvited guest of European descent, it is important to recognize and speak out about the violence and harm colonization had and continues to have on the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. The war on drugs has caused compounding intergenerational harms to many people and has been used as a tool by the government to punish, capture, and imprison marginalized people, including and in particular Indigenous people, as made clear by the fact that Indigenous adults make up to 30% of Canada's prison population, despite only representing 5% of the Canadian population. As we work to decolonize harm reduction at max, we need to recognize the autonomy, wisdom, practices, and traditions of the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people living in our community. We strive to create a space where all community members are safe and have access to competent and culturally informed services, and be aware of the roles that we play supporting Indigenous created and led programming. We aim to listen, learn, and improve our knowledge and understanding of the true history and present of Indigenous peoples so that we can actively and properly support a future where everyone living on Turtle Island are mentally, physically, sexually, financially, socially, and spiritually healthy and well. Also, you might hear my cat in the background. She just, as soon as I start talking when I'm working from home, she decides that she wants to join in. So you may hear her chime in from time to time, as she is wont to do. So next we're going to talk about the outcomes for the evening. So at the end of this presentation, we would want everyone to be able to define what booty bumping is and how to do it, explain the criteria for what can be booty bumped, to be able to have sex when you are booty bumping, and prevent HIV, Hep C, and other STBBIs. So we're going to dive right into Booty Bumping 101. So what is booty bumping? Well, booty bumping is a method of consumption where you consume a substance by dissolving it in water and injecting it into your butt through a syringe or preferably a lube injector, which can also be referred to as a lube injector syringe. What can I booty bump? Well, anything that's water soluble, such as crystal meth in its powder form and cocaine. If it needs to be dissolved in an acid like black tar heroin or can cause burns or is considered caustic, like GBL, which is a form of GHB, then these are not necessarily ideal for booty bumping. Speaking of GHB, it is possible, or speaking of GBL and GHB, it is possible to booty bump GHB, but sometimes when we get G, we're not always 100% sure whether it's GHB or GBL. So unless you're 100% sure you know exactly what it is, it might be best not to booty bump it. One trick, though, it's not necessarily a guarantee, but you can use the taste, as GHB tends to taste saltier, and GHB kind of tastes more like a chemical kind of bitter flavor. The kind of best description I've heard of explaining its flavor was like turpentine, like it tasted the way that turpentine smells. So that's usually GBL. Not 100% guarantee. Realistically, like GHB and GBL should be consumed orally. Another thing to keep in mind, considering we're talking about different things to consider when it comes to booty bumping, we also have to deal with the pH scale. Because if anything is too acidic or is too basic, then it is possible that it could cause you discomfort or damage to your rectal lining. So we have a little pH scale here, so we're going to talk about that. So for instance, the pH scale is measured from 1 to 14, with 7 being neutral. So for instance, water has a neutral balance or pH balance of 7. And pH balances lower than 7 are considered acidic, and pH levels that are higher than 7 are considered basic. So something like Adderall or Speed has a pH of 5 to 6, making it slightly acidic, while the rectum has a pH balance of between 7 and 8, so neutral to slightly basic. When mixing in the right amounts, a basic substance and an acidic substance will combine and make a neutral solution. But considering we don't know necessarily the quality of substances that are being used, we can't really prescribe a certain, like how much of a substance to take in order to balance out the pH in your rectum. You could use a litmus test if you wanted, which is the little thing over here, if you wanted, in order to try and find out the pH of a substance. If it's something that you're trying to use that maybe isn't something you've heard a lot about or a lot of people talk about using, checking the pH might be a good way to tell if it would be a good candidate for booty bumping. So the next question is, how much should I take if I'm trying to booty bump for the first time? And honestly, this is the $100,000 question. As we unfortunately aren't in a place to give like a prescriptive dose telling you exactly how much you should take if you're booty bumping for the first time, it's a really, really hard question to answer. One of the things that we do say is that you could start with kind of the smallest amount you've ever consumed, and then go from there. It may mean that you might not get the high you're looking for the first time you try booty bumping, but sometimes it pays to start low and go slow. Just because, as I said, we can't really give like this is the amount based on, how much you use or what substances they are or BMI or anything like that. It's really, really hard to give like really good suggestions or really good information around dosing. And to be honest, booty bumping is an under-researched and under-discussed method of drug consumption, possibly as a result of homophobia, because this is very heavily linked with gay sex, and with men's butts in particular, and subject matter researching around gay sex or like male sexuality, male pleasure, especially when it comes around to like anal, they're often overlooked, or they might be considered an unseemly subject to be researched. So there might just not be as much interest in researching it because they just don't see the impetus in doing it. The other reason is because it's mostly geared towards controlled substances. And doing research around controlled substances means that you need to get an exemption from the government. So basically, you're also relying on the researchers to find a reason to do this kind of research, but then you're also needing the government to give an exemption to be able to do this research. So this may be one of the reasons. These may be some of the reasons why we don't have as much information about booty bumping as we could. There is actually some discussion about how more medication should be consumed anally, due to the general stigma around anything anal. Most prescriptions are meant for oral consumption. So basically, as it says, we're all prepared to swallow, but not all of us are prepared to take things up our butt. This part of the presentation is not to scare anybody. It's not to be like, ooh, there's so much danger here. It's mostly just to be really transparent about the fact that there is a lot of things we don't have a ton of information about. We don't necessarily know anything about long-term effects. We really don't have any clear information about dosing. And there's not there's not as much research and a solid list of like things that can and cannot be booty bumped. Which is all things that we could have if we had more research done into this subject. All right. So why would I choose to booty bump instead of another form of consumption? So I could smoke, I could slam, I could snort. Why would I choose to booty bump instead? Well, there are a few different reasons why someone would choose to booty bump, and we're going to explore those in the next section. So the first one's bioavailability. So bioavailability is a fancy way of saying the ability of a drug or other substance to be absorbed and used by the body. So drugs administered per rectum is also fancy way of saying to take it anally, have a faster action than via the oral route, and have a higher effectiveness for when the drug is being absorbed, because it's not influenced by the upper gastrointestinal tract digestive process. So basically, because it gets to skip the small intestine and the stomach, it actually does skip quite a bit of these different breakdown processes, so it's really unaltered. Rectal absorption results in more of the drug reaching the system's circulation, so getting into your bloodstream, with less alteration en route. As well as being more effective route for delivering medication, rectal administration also reduces side effects of some drugs, such as gastric irritation, nausea, and vomiting. So if you ever have to take medication that causes you to feel nauseous, or maybe you get stomach upsets from it, if you were able to take them anally, you wouldn't have to worry about that necessarily for all medications. So that might be a reason why somebody would choose to booty bump over another form of consumption. Another reason would be intensity. So the high from booty bumping is similar to, but less intense than slamming or injecting. If someone's not familiar with the term slamming just is another way to say injecting your drugs or injecting your substance. So you know that it's a bit more intense than smoking or snorting, which is good information if that's how you normally consume and you're getting ready to try booty bumping for the first time. Booty bumping may also be a form of vein maintenance. Vein maintenance is a harm reduction strategy that moves the injection points around the body to prevent vein damage, like blown, collapsed, or scarred veins. So people who inject will often kind of like move the injection points around, switching arms, moving to the legs, moving to the feet in a rotation in order to try and give them their veins as much time to heal in between injections as possible, in order to prevent this kind of like longer term vein damage. Some harm reduction workers have talked about this as a booty bumping kind of like fitting in as like another alternative to help give more time in that rotation. So if you start on, say, your left arm and you're going left arm to right leg to left leg, if you include booty bumping in there, it gives everything else a bit more time to heal before coming back to them. And because it does hit similarly to, though less intensely than slamming, it might be a good alternative if somebody was looking for something else to break up their like slamming substance use. The other reason people might use it is at supervised consumption sites. So with COVID-19 restrictions, they've definitely impacted injection support at some supervised consumption sites. And booty bumping was being tested out in some of these sites, like it's the Sandy Hill Community Health Center, where clients were provided Max's booty bumping kits and a space to try booty bumping. This became necessary as a trial because the staff weren't able to assist with injections during COVID-19 because of social distancing, and folks who needed help injecting might not have been able to get it. Since booty bumping has a similar high, they had the idea to offer it as an alternative. And fortunately, they got a government exemption and were able to start offering the booty bumping kit since November of last year. So far from what I've heard at the beginning of handing these supplies out, it was surprisingly popular. So it's interesting to see that there's a bit more appetite for it out there in the world. So that's kind of an introductory, a little bit of what booty bumping is and what we can booty bump. But now it's time to look at the steps to booty bumping. And for that, I'm going to turn to Matt from a few days ago, who filmed a step-by-step instruction of how to booty bump. So I will pass that to past Matt to do that for you.
Peaches or something to booty. Oh, hello. You caught me right as I was about to start a booty bumping demonstration. For this demonstration, you will need peaches or something to booty bump, a glass, a way to clean your hands, a lube injector syringe, some lubricant, water, an instructional guide, and your substance of choice. Now, step one for this is going to be clean your hands. Always important before we get this started to clean your hands and make sure that you have a clean workspace as much as possible. If you're going to be using one of Max's booty bumping kits, And you'll want to make sure you take all the supplies out before getting started. And then place them on your workspace. Maybe some organization first. Getting everything together can help make this go a little smoother. All right, next we're going to get into step 2. We're going to start by preparing the booty bump itself. So we're going to need either the glass or our lube injector syringe in order to prep our substance. Let's start with using the glass. We're just going to start by putting in some sterile water. So this is a 3 ml water tube. And then squeeze it all out into the glass. Then we're going to take a little bit of the substance. The dosage is going to really depend on a lot of different factors. We're not really doing any prescriptive dosing for this, but whatever the dosing amount that you are going to put, this is where you'd measure it in. Because we're using sugar as our substitute, I'm just going to pour some in, and then we'll start dissolving it. All right. And then if we're doing it directly in the syringe, we're going to have to remove the cap because the plunger has pressure. So if you try to pull the plunger out with the cap on, it's going to try to resist. So pop the cap off, pull the plunger straight out, and then put your cap back on and right away. If you're pouring your water and you're going to be mixing your solution inside of your syringe, you're going to want to make sure that you keep the cap on. Otherwise, the water and your substance is going to spill out onto the floor, and it's going to be a big mess and a waste to clean up. So just like with the glass container, we're just going to crack open our second 3 ml, and we're just going to pour some directly into our syringe. And then once it's nice and full there, we can do the same thing. We're going to add in some of our substance, in this case, again, sugar, and just pour some in there. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure we put the plunger back on. And once the plunger's in slightly, you want to tilt it upwards so it's facing up. Remove the cap and then push the plunger down. So that way you can remove the excess air and then recap it. So now it won't spill. And you can shake it up to help encourage your substance to dissolve in the water. The more dissolved it is, the better it'll be for inside your intestines, because if there's large crystals or there's large chunks of your substance in there, it can cause irritations or scratches and tears, or it could cause slight burns depending on what substance it is that you're consuming. So you want to make sure to encourage it to dissolve as much as possible before it gets anywhere near your booty. Now, back to the glass, because if we've mixed our solution inside of the bottom of the glass, then we need to somehow get it inside of the syringe. Now, you can use it like a regular syringe by placing it into the glass on an angle, it's kind of hard to see because of the shape of the glass, but if you put it right into the bottom, get a good grip on it, and then start to pull up with the plunger, it'll start to drain up all of the water from the bottom. So it's hard to see, but this is now full of water. And again, we're going to push the excess water out and cap it. That's how you can draw your pre-made solution from a glass. The benefit of the glass is if you're, say, mixing a little bit more than maybe what fits in one syringe or one dose, and there happens to be some of your substance left inside the water at the bottom of the glass, if you leave it out, the water will evaporate and what is left behind will crystallize again, or will turn back into a solid. Then when you add more water later to make your next dose, that will dissolve back into the water. So it basically prevents you from wasting any of your supply by leaving some of it in there to crystallize on its own so that you can reuse it later. One of the key things is, if you're going to use one of these though, do not double dip your syringes. So once the syringe goes inside of a booty, it doesn't go back in here. By double dipping, you could bacteria into the water that could culture over time. So as you leave it to sit and evaporate, leaving your substance behind, it could be coated in bacteria that comes from the booty that you've done the injection in, either yours or maybe someone else's, and you don't want to reintroduce that back into a booty later. All right, before we move on to step 3, we're going to have a quick talk about the water that we used. So for this demonstration, we used sterile water that came in our booty bumping kit. If you don't have access to this at home, you want to boil some water in order to remove any of the impurities out of it, and then you can let it cool down to lukewarm, just warm to touch, and then you can use that in your booty bumping kit. If you have been carrying these around and it's particularly cold and they feel cold to touch, you do want to warm up the water tubes. You can roll them in your hand or put them either into your elbow and then let your body heat warm it up, or you can put it in your armpit or anywhere else. You basically want the water to be warm to the touch, slightly above body temperature. That way it won't feel cold when it goes inside, and it will prevent you from getting cramps. If the water is way too cold, it can definitely cause some cramping and discomfort when you're trying to booty bump. All right, time for step 3. We're going to prepare the booty. So we have all these lovely booties to choose from. Let's pick our favorite. I'm going to choose this one. So this is going to be the booty that we're bumping. So the first step we have to do is prep it by giving it some lubricant. So we're going to tear open our lube packet. If you have lube at home, you can use that. And then we want to put just a finger's amount on top of where the crease is. So we have this nice pre-lubed spot ready for the booty bump syringe for when it's ready to booty bump. And we'll set you aside just while we get everything else ready. All right, and we're going to do step 4. So step 4 is preparing the booty bumping syringe to booty bump. So we're going to take one of our pre-made doses inside one of these syringes. We're going to remove the cap, making sure that this is pointing upwards. Again, if you take the cap off and it's pointing down, it might spill out. We're going to need some more lube. And then we're just going to squeeze a little out onto that lube injector to make sure that it's nice and slick and ready for insertion. Want to make sure you rub around it. Get it all over there. There's no such thing as too much lube when it comes to anything butt related. Alright, now it's time to get on to step 5. We're going to be getting ourselves into a nice comfortable position in order to actually be able to do the booty bump. So, we could be maybe standing, we could be laying down on our side, or we could be laying on our back with our legs up in the air. Whatever is the most comfortable, and then whatever gives you the ability to reach down and actually do the insertion and the booty bumping. The main thing is to not be squatting or hunched over. If you're squatting, there's a possibility that some of your substance is going to leak out, and then you're going to end up wasting some of it. If it is your first time or you're newer to booty bumping, it's worthwhile to try doing it once or twice with just plain water in order to see if you're spilling any. So once you get the technique down and you can do it without any the excess spilling or leaking, then you know you're in a good spot that you could maybe try it with the substance in it. The last thing you want to do is waste your supply while you're trying out to figure out how to booty bump. And now we're getting on to step 6, which is going to be getting the booty bumping syringe, the last step of getting the booty bumping syringe ready before it's time to insert. So for this, we're going to want to make sure we get our pointer and middle fingers on either side of the grips here at the bottom, and then our thumb on the plunger. This will be how we do our injection. All right, and now we're on to step 7, which is going to be doing the actual booty bump. We're going to take our booty, and we're going to line up and very gently slide that into the booty. You do want to go until you sort of feel the knuckles press against the butt cheeks. You want to make sure it goes deep enough and that it's not just being shot into the opening part of the anus. You want to get all the way in to make sure that it gets past the sphincters. And then once it's in, gently push out in order to get all of that dosage in. And then we're going to leave it in just for a quick sec. And then we're going to gently pull it back out. And that's it. That's the booty bump. All right, and we're on to step 8, which is cleaning up, finishing up, whatever you want to call it. We have the bump inside the booty. We're going to leave that there. It's not like douching where you're trying to flush water in and then flush water out. The water is meant to stay. This water is full of substances, which is going to get absorbed into the body. So you want to make sure you kind of keep your butt muscles tight in order to keep all that water in there. Imagine you're holding in a fart, a very wet fart that's full of substances. So you want to make sure you keep that in there, let it absorb. The syringe can be tossed away. These are reusable syringes. They can be cleaned and then reused. Just make sure it's washed with soap and water. And as much as possible, you want to keep them to single person use. If there are nicks or scratches, if somebody possibly has open sores around the booty that they're bumping, it is possible for STDs, HIV, or Hep C to be transmitted by sharing syringes. So it's best to just use your own if you're going to keep reusing it. The other thing that we want to do when we're done is make sure that we are washing our hands. So less about the STBBIs, and mostly about the bacteria, because touching butts means that you could cause infections like Giardia or Shigella if you were to bring bacteria from the butt to other parts. So you want to make sure you're always washing your hands when you're done. And there we have it. Booty bumping from start to finish. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, feel free to contact me directly at m.adams.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just gonna remove the I think you're still muted.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think we're good to go. Back to the slideshow. So thanks for everyone for indulging in the video explanation. The peaches were a big mess, so it was really nice to get to do it in advance. Otherwise, I would be covered in peach juice as we speak, trying to do this presentation with you now. So thank you. But yeah, so that's our step-by-step walkthrough. And then we're going to move on to our next section, which is called Just the Tips. So we're going to start with some general tips, just overall for booty bumping. So as much as possible, dissolve your substance in water rather than what is sometimes called dabbing or stuffing. So dabbing is when you try to just put the substance directly in. So say you put a little bit of a substance on the end of a finger or on the end of a sex toy, and then just insert it inside the butt. That would be considered dabbing. Stuffing would be as if, say, you wrapped it in something like something that would dissolve, like rolling papers, and then inserted that inside your butt. Both of those things can cause scratches. They can cause tears, and because it's a little collection of the substance all together, if it was something that was either really acidic or really basic, it could cause some caustic burns because it wouldn't have the water to help facilitate its spread and help neutralize it. So these, as much as possible, try to make sure that you're dissolving your substance in water. Try to consume with folks you know, and you can keep each other safe. So taking turns when consuming can be a form of overdose prevention. That way that if something goes wrong or someone goes into distress for any reason, there would be somebody in the room that's at a different stage of their high that would be able to step in and help. So if somebody starts, then you wait a bit, and then the next person would start their use. And then the idea is that because you're in different stages, odds are that somebody would be able to respond if something happened. We also always carry and know how to use naloxone. Unfortunately, with fentanyl contamination in the street drug supply, any substance has the potential to cause an opioid drug poisoning by way of fentanyl contamination. It's best to know how to use naloxone and keep a few kits around your place or on hand. It may be better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. If you do want to learn more about naloxone, we do a monthly virtual naloxone training at Max on the third Tuesday of every month. If you go to our Facebook or our Eventbrite page, you can see all of the upcoming events, all the upcoming dates for the naloxone training for the next 6 months. But yeah, it's third Tuesday of every month. Now we're going to get into some tips for first timers who are trying to booty bump. So try doing it with just water. Like earlier Matt said in the video, it is beneficial to try doing it with just water. That way you can kind of figure out how the process works without spilling or wasting any of your supply. You know, if you try it out and you spill or it misses or it all just kind of falls out, does not get where it needs to, then at least you learned how to do it better without wasting any of your very expensive or hard to come by supply. You do want to make sure that the water is at least warm to touch. I know I also touched old Matt in the video also talked about that as well, but it's really important that it is not cold when it goes in. You do not want to cause the cramping. And as it said, the ideal temperature for water is slightly above body temperature, so somewhere between 36.6 to 40 degrees Celsius. But you do, as long as it's warm to touch, like lukewarm, that's usually a good temperature to have for the water that you're using for booty bumping. The other thing is douche before. Douching before booty bumping, not only does this mean that your syringe won't be poking anything around that's inside of you, but it also means that your substance won't get flushed out if you have to go to the bathroom for a bowel movement after you've booty bumped. Because if you were to, say, booty bump and then there happened to be something and there was a train in the tunnel, as they say, and it decided that it was time to leave the station, then there's a possibility that all of your substances will get flushed out as well, and then that means you might have wasted some supply in that instance. So douching beforehand can help out. If you are having sex after booty bumping too, douching beforehand is a really good idea because then it's already done for when it's time to have sex. We have some even more tips, just so many tips tonight. We're going. So some more first-timer tips. Start low and go slow. If this is your first time or it's a new supply or a new dealer or anything like that, if there's any change and from the last time that you've consumed, it's a good idea to start low and go slow. My favorite expression is you can always have more, but you can't have less. So I like to keep that in mind with me when I'm talking about how I talk about how I consume. Wait at least an hour between doses to see how the substances affect you. So you'll likely start to feel the effects about 10 minutes after the booty bumping starts. So once you've kind of plunged all of the booty bump into your butt, it takes about 10 minutes for it to kick in. But it's good to wait to see how the peak feels before consuming more. Booty bumping, the high might be a bit more intense, and it might kick in a little faster than how you're used to if you're using something. If this is your first time booty bumping, but a substance you've tried before. Now, I've talked about this quite a few times, but it is really important to just acknowledge that this might be a slightly different experience than what you're used to if you've consumed in a different way. Because of the bioavailability we talked about earlier, it does absorb more of the substance, and it absorbs it very efficiently. So that's why it can sometimes kick in a little harder and kick in a little faster. And there's always the opportunity to help each other out with booty bumping. If you're having difficulty getting the positioning right or getting the angle in, or you're just having difficulty maneuvering all of the things, if there's someone there to help you out with it that you trust and that is willing to try helping you out, then feel free to help each other out. The more resistance, the more, if it's going in on a weird angle, the more things like that happen, the more chance there is that it could cause like nicks or small tears or scratches. And then if that happens, then it just changes or it changes the chances or increases the likelihood that there might be some sort of transmission of an STBBI or HIV or Hep C. Ooh, and now on to the last section before we do our final takeaway, which I guess would be our last section. So our penultimate section is booty bumping and sex. So we want to keep in mind the interactions between substance use and sex, particularly if we're going to booty bump and bottom. Here we want to talk about what we can do to have sex and booty bump while minimizing the chances of HIV, Hep C, and STBBI transmission. Also, just so that it's like the best experience possible, because, you know, we got to, when it comes to things like this, we can't always just focus necessarily on the health aspects. There also needs to be this reclamation of pleasure. You know, if booty bumping and bottoming didn't feel good, no one would do it. So we do have to acknowledge that there's definitely pleasure in it. So some tips for booty bumping before bottoming. So you do want to keep an eye out for large crystals in your booty bumping water. I know Video Matt also said this, but when you are booty bumping, sometimes those like small undissolved bits of your substance, if it gets inside there and the water gets absorbed and just there's that little bit of substance there, that could be really irritating. That could cause scratches, that could cause tears, or some burns depending on the substance. So if you're bottoming after booty bumping, try using a really, really well lubed condom, or use lots and lots of good lube in order to kind of facilitate the sex as much as possible without, you know, encouraging any scratching or tearing. As it said in the video, when it comes to anal, there's no such thing as too much lube. So keep that in mind as you're trying this out. Wait a few minutes before starting to bottom. Take some time, really as long as you're willing to wait, as long as possible, between consuming and bottoming. You want to let your body start absorbing the substance before having sex. It also means the top won't accidentally draw out your booty bump by the way of suction from aggressive or enthusiastic topping. So if they went in really hard, really fast, and caused some suction and pulled some of the fluid out, it's possible that they could undo some of your booty bumping, and then that would kind of kill the high that you were going for. So yeah, if possible, try to wait a little bit before starting to bottom. And communication is key. As is with everything sex and substance use related, communication is important. If you are planning to booty bump and to bottom bareback, it's really important to talk to the tops that you're having come over. It is possible for the top to absorb some of the substance through their penis, because the penis is also a mucous membrane. And especially if they're topping you like very shortly after you booty bumped. An unexpected high like that could be a really unpleasant experience for somebody, especially because they didn't plan on it, they weren't expecting it. So it's really good to let them know that you have what you've consumed, that you've consumed, and how you've consumed, so that both of you can make sure that everyone involved can make sure that the sex that you're having is fun, exciting, and pleasurable, which is the exact kind of sex that everybody deserves. So it's just really important to share that. You just don't want somebody to have a surprise meth high if they weren't expecting it. Or any other type of high. I know they said meth, but any other type of high, it could still be absorbed through the penis. So you definitely would want to tell somebody that there is a substance where they're going to be putting their penis. Couple more tips. So depending on the substance, it can cause your butt to go numb. So you want to be cautious when you're bottoming, because just because you don't feel anything doesn't necessarily mean that there might not be damage being caused. This is really relevant if you're going to be trying things like fisting, or you want to try taking some particularly large toys. If you're like new to fisting or you're new to playing with large toys, it is best to avoid booty bumping as you're starting that journey and like learning what your body's limits are, because learning what your body's limits are is an important part of knowing when it's being stretched too much or being stretched too far. So having your butt being numbed means that you can't tell when it's too far, which could, as I said, cause some damage. And then that means that you might be out of the game for a little bit while you're recovering, which might not be what you necessarily intended. So it is best to avoid booty bumping around fisting and large toys if you're new to trying and playing with those. The other thing is booty bumping can cause hemorrhoids, some rectal pain, and bleeding. I know we've talked about bleeding and rectal pain and abdominal pain and cramps quite a bit, but anything that can booty bumping isn't supposed to cause any of these things. But if it's too rushed, or if, for say, you weren't using a lube injector syringe, but maybe you were using a 5 mil or a 3 mil syringe that you could get through your local harm reduction program, as opposed to the smooth lube injector syringe, it is possible that this could cause damage, the scratching, the tearing, the bleeding, the discomfort. So if you are bottoming, you really want to keep in mind that any of these types of wounds can increase the ease of transmitting or acquiring STBBIs. So anything that causes a break in the barrier that allows fluids to exchange, it increases the chance that there could be some sort of transmission or acquisition that will go on. So it's just one thing to keep in mind and to keep an eye on. All right, and then so we're going to get into the next section, which is tips for preventing HIV and Hep C transmission while booty bumping. So, I mean, the first place to start is use your normal prevention strategies. You already probably have strategies you're using to prevent HIV and Hep C transmission. So why don't we stick with those? You may be using PrEP or accessing PEP. You may be on ART, so antiretroviral therapy, which is the medication that allows people living with HIV to become and maintain being undetectable. Condoms, both internal and external condoms. Serosorting. So serosorting means to choose partners with the same HIV status as you. This sort of has extended a little bit into also choosing partners who are on PrEP or who are undetectable, because their HIV status is known. And usually the being undetectable and being on PrEP usually involves some form of follow-up testing. So if you were serosorting and only hooking up with other folks on PrEP, or with folks on PrEP, or with people who are undetectable, you do sort of know that they know their HIV status and that they are getting tested that they're at least getting tested in order to keep up with their medications. Pulling out. It's not the best way in the world, but it does reduce the amount of fluid exchange that can happen, that would normally happen if the top were to finish inside the bottom. So it doesn't eliminate anything, but it can reduce the amount of fluid exchange that happens. And of course, getting tested regularly. It's one of my favorite things to talk about when we talk about normal prevention, because I think getting tested and knowing your status is equally as important as using condoms or being on PrEP, or serosorting, or whatever you're using. Getting tested is equally as important, and should be also considered part of your prevention strategy. Basically, you want to stick with what's working for you. Whatever combination you're using, whatever is the best for you, keep doing it even while you're booty bumping and while you are having sex. All right, and I know I mentioned it before too, don't share the lube injector syringes. In case there are any tears when you're booty bumping or any blood comes into contact with the syringe. Hep C really doesn't need a lot of blood in order to be transmitted. So even if there was a teensy tiny little amount and it got put inside someone else, there is a chance that could cause a transmission, just because it's really, it doesn't require a lot. It's really, really small amount. If you're looking to get booty bumping syringes, we actually give them out as part of our Max's T2Go program, as part of our booty bumping kits. So if you're in the Ottawa or Gatineau area, or the surrounding area around us, around Ottawa and Gatineau, You can order them for free through Max's website. So there's the link there. But if you just go to maxottawa.ca, hit programs and harm reduction, the online order form is the first thing you see at the top of the page. And you can see all of the items that we carry, including booty bumping and naloxone. So that's it. We managed to get through all of the content. We're just going to do some final takeaways. And, you know, I have some final words of wisdom to impart on you that came from the last time I did this presentation with some community members. And it was some wisdom that the community shared. And this is from some folks who, you know, had done booty bumping before, and they wanted to share what they had learned about it. So what they said was, you know, booty bumping can increase the intensity of the high and absorbs faster than smoking. So that was one thing that the community members had identified as an experience that they had. And this is also really important if, say, you were planning a hookup and you wanted to start using and you wanted to time when your peak would be. Because if you're trying to like do your consumption before they get there and you want to be at the right spot when they arrive, it's good to know that this kicks in faster than smoking and a little harder. The second thing they said is it can be really disappointing when it doesn't work or when there isn't enough of the substance in the booty bump. It can be worthwhile to persist and, you know, trying over and over or trying again and again. And eventually you can find the right amount that works for you. It may take a few times where the high isn't as good or it's not what you're expecting. But if you really do want to, you know, booty bump more, it might take a bit of practice to get there. The other thing they said was to avoid overdosing when it feels good, stop for now. So pacing yourself. I know we talked about starting low and going slow, but pacing yourself is a really good way to prevent overdose. Only you know what your limits are, so recognize those limits and party within them. And our last page of takeaways. So you can booty bump water-soluble substances like crystal meth or cocaine by mixing it with water and injecting it in your butt. The first try might not give you the high you were looking for. You want to use lots of lube when you're booty bumping and having sex after. No such thing as too much lube. And if you can, wait a bit before bottoming. You want as much of the substance to be absorbed to prevent irritation and tears before you start getting anything going in and out and in and out and all that friction that comes with that. And avoid sharing syringes. That will help reduce the chance of HIV or Hep C transmission, maybe other STBBIs, depending on if there were any tears, scratches, or any other type of damage done to the rectal lining while trying out booty bumping. So that's it. I really want to thank you for all your patience and attention. I think we have 5 minutes left in case anybody has any comments, questions, or concerns, and my email address is provided. If you'd rather ask a question in private, I'm more than happy to answer them. I've actually had questions privately asked of me. The whole thing about the pH balance and whether or not you can consume speed or Adderall was actually from somebody who emailed me to ask me about it. And then we did some digging and we found that out. So that's actually like fairly new information added to this presentation by somebody who just asked a question in private. So feel free to do that if that's what works best.
Thank you so much, Matt. You've covered pretty much everything. I don't have any question, and you receive questions in private. So if someone is watching this video later on YouTube and they have questions, they can always email us and we'll be happy to answer their questions. You've mentioned the naloxone training and also our T2Go program. So I see no questions in the chat. We have a comment. Thank you both. It was really interesting and I learned many new things. Thank you. Thank you, Samuel. It's very nice.
Thanks.
Okay. And we have an article that you wrote, and it's in our Max blog, so we can always add that in the captions. I see no other questions. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you ever get one of the booty bumping kits, the instruction guide that is provided has pretty much all of the same information. The instructional guide and the original presentation were designed at the same time. So other than adding in the new information about the pH balance as something to keep in mind, if you were to get the booty bumping kit, the instruction guides that are provided are entirely they're pretty much exactly the same. And it's also available in French. So you can have your booty bumping guide in French as well, if you'd prefer that in French over English.
Great, thank you. Bilingual booty bumping information. We love that. Thank you, Matt. And thank you to all the participants. And I think we're good to stop the live. I'm just